humble child played broken piano to support his grandmother, until the Tycoon heard it and trembled. Ethan had nothing left in the world but his small hands dancing over the yellowed keys of an abandoned piano and the woman who had raised him since he was a baby. Life had been hard on them both, but the music that flowed from that broken instrument was the only hope they had left. It was on an October morning, as the 10-year-old boy played in Liberty Square in Atlanta, that everything changed. Richard Anderson, one of the wealthiest businessmen in Georgia, was rushing toward his office when he stopped abruptly. His eyes filled with tears as he recognized the melody echoing through the streets. It was impossible. That song was exactly the same one his late wife Claire used to play every night before bed. The boy kept playing, completely unaware of the man in the expensive suit watching him. Beside him, Mrs. Grace held a cardboard box where people dropped a few coins. The 68-year-old woman had her graying hair covered by a beige scarf and wore simple but clean clothes. Her tired eyes showed the daily struggle for survival. "Grandma, that man over there is staring at me weirdly," Ethan whispered without stopping his playing. "Keep playing, my boy, don't mind anyone," Grace replied, adjusting her scarf. Richard approached slowly, as if afraid the music would stop. When Ethan finished the piece, the businessman couldn't hold back his emotion. "Where did you learn that song, boy?" Ethan glanced at his grandmother before answering. Grace signaled for him to be polite. I taught myself, sir. I watched through the window at the Claire Wilson School of Music up the street. The teacher won't let me in, but I can see her teaching the other kids. And how long have you been playing here in the square?" "Since I was 7, Ethan answered, lowering his head. "Grandma got sick and lost her job at the wealthy family's home where she worked. So I started playing to help pay for her medicine." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. That boy, in his worn but clean clothes, played with a skill he had never seen in someone so young. And the music. How was it possible he knew exactly the melody Claire had composed years ago? "Can I ask you a strange question?" Richard said, pulling out his wallet. "That song you just played, did someone teach it to you?" "No, sir. I dreamed it one night, and when I woke up, I could play it on the piano. Grandma says I have a special gift." Grace watched the conversation warily. Well-dressed men like him rarely approached people like them without ulterior motives. "Are you going to give something, or did you just come to talk?" she asked sharply. "Because if it's just talk, you're in the way. People don't stop when someone's standing here." Richard placed a $50 bill in the box, making Ethan's eyes light up. "Grandma, look. It's more than we make in a whole week. Put that money away safely, Ethan." "And thank you, sir," Grace said, visibly relieved but still cautious. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, in the days that followed, Richard couldn't get the image of the boy out of his head. During meetings at his construction company, he found himself thinking about the melody Ethan had played. How was it possible that a child of just 10 knew a composition his wife had created in secret? Claire had never shown that song to anyone, not even him. That Thursday, Richard decided to return to the square. He arrived earlier, around 7 in the morning, and found Ethan already sitting at the old piano. But this time, the boy was alone. "Where's your grandmother?" "She's at home, resting. She had a bad spell last night and couldn't get out of bed today," Ethan replied, his voice worried. "But I still need to play. Her medicine ran out yesterday." Richard noticed the boy's hands trembling slightly, not from nerves but from hunger. He glanced around and spotted a bakery on the corner. "Have you had breakfast yet?" Ethan shook his head without stopping his playing. "Come with me, let's get you something to eat." "I can't, sir. If I leave, I'll miss the workers passing by on their way to their jobs. That's when I make the most money." Richard felt a pang in his chest. This child was carrying a burden no adult should have to bear. "What if I stay here and watch the piano while you grab a quick bite?" Ethan stopped playing and looked at Richard in surprise. "You'd do that?" "Of course. Hurry up before I change my mind." As Ethan ran to the bakery, Richard sat at the broken piano. Some keys didn't work, others were out of tune, but it was still playable. He tried a few notes and immediately recognized the instrument's ease. It was as if someone had adjusted the piano to work despite its flaws. When Ethan returned with a buttered roll in hand, Richard was playing a soft melody. "You can play too." "I learned when I was young. My wife taught me," Richard said, stopping. "Actually, I need to ask you something important. Are you sure you've never heard the song you play anywhere before? Not on the radio, TV, nothing?" "I'm sure, sir." "Why?" Richard hesitated. How could he explain to a child that the music he played had been composed by his late wife? How could he tell him that Claire had kept that melody a secret until the day she passed? "It's just a very special song to me. Someone very important used to play it." "The person you lost?" Ethan's question caught Richard off guard. How had the boy guessed? "How did you know I lost someone?" "When you play, you get the same look Grandma has when she talks about my grandpa. She says those who truly love never forget." Richard felt his eyes well up. This child had wisdom far beyond his years. "You're right. I lost my wife 2 years ago, and this song, she wrote it for me." Ethan stopped eating and stared at Richard in amazement. "So the lady you loved lives on in the music. Grandma always says the people we love never really leave. They stay in the beautiful things they left behind." In that moment, Richard realized something much bigger was happening here. It wasn't a coincidence that this boy knew Claire's music. There was a connection he needed to uncover. "Ethan, tell me something. Has your grandmother always lived here in Atlanta?" "Yes, sir. She was born here and never left. She worked her whole life cleaning for a wealthy family's home. She always says she met a lot of important people over the years. And she never mentioned a woman named Claire, someone who loved music." Ethan thought for a moment. "Not that I remember, sir. But Grandma forgets things sometimes. The doctor at the clinic says it's because of her age and exhaustion." Richard decided he needed to learn more about this family's story. Something didn't add up, and he was determined to find out what. "Ethan, where do you live?" "Over in the projects, sir," the boy said, pointing to a row of small houses at the end of the street. "House 23. It's just one room, but Grandma keeps it real clean. Do you think she'd be upset if I visited her? I'd like to get to know her better and maybe help you both somehow." Ethan was silent for a moment. "You seem like a good man, but Grandma has her pride. She doesn't like taking help from strangers. She says we're not beggars. What if it wasn't help? What if it was work?" "What kind of work, sir?" Richard wasn't entirely sure what to do yet, but he knew he couldn't leave things as they were. That boy had exceptional talent and deserved a chance. More than that, he needed to understand the connection between Ethan and Claire's music. "Let me think of something. For now, keep playing here, and I'll come back tomorrow." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He stared at the photo of Claire on his nightstand, trying to understand how a street kid could know the music she had composed. He got up and went to his home office, where he kept the sheet music his wife had left behind. He searched through the papers until he found the folder with Claire's compositions. There it was, the sheet music for the song Ethan had been playing, handwritten by Claire herself. In the corner of the page was a note he had never noticed before. "To my dear teacher Grace, who taught me that music is the language of the soul." Richard's legs nearly gave out. Grace. Ethan's grandmother was named Grace. It couldn't be a coincidence. The next morning, he arrived at the square before Ethan. When the boy appeared, he was with his grandmother. Grace walked slowly, leaning on a makeshift wooden cane. "Good morning, sir," Ethan said. "Grandma wanted to come today to meet you." Grace looked at Richard with tired but attentive eyes. "My grandson told me you've been coming here every day. I wanted to know what your intentions are with the boy." "Mrs. Grace, may I ask you something? Did you ever teach music?" The question caught the elderly woman off guard. "A long time ago, yes. Why do you ask?" "Do you remember a student named Claire Wilson?" Grace froze. Her eyes widened and she began to tremble. "Claire, my little Claire," she whispered, pressing a hand to her chest. "How do you know my Claire?" "She was my wife." The silence that followed was almost deafening. Grace gripped her cane tighter, and Ethan looked back and forth between them in confusion. Your wife? Grace asked, her voice breaking. But she got married. She had a family. Yes, we were married for 15 years until she passed 2 years ago. Grace began to cry, not out of sadness but from relief and joy mixed together. My little girl found love. She found someone who made her happy. Grandma, what are you talking about? Ethan asked, growing more confused. Ethan, my dear, she was the girl I loved teaching music to most in my whole life. She showed up at my door when she was just 12, asking to learn piano. She couldn't pay, but I saw something special in her. Richard sat on the bench beside the piano, still processing the revelation. Claire never told me she had a private teacher. She always said she taught herself. She didn't want me in her life after she became successful, Grace said, wiping her tears. She said she was going to travel the world and didn't want me to feel abandoned. She left when she turned 18 and never came back. But she left this for you, Richard said, pulling the sheet music from his pocket. I found it last night among her things. Grace took the paper with trembling hands and read the dedication. To my dear teacher Grace, who taught me that music is the language of the soul. She wrote this for me. And now I understand how Ethan knows how to play this song, Richard said. You taught it to him. No, Grace answered, shaking her head. I never taught Ethan this song. Actually, I didn't even remember her anymore. I only recalled her now that you showed me the sheet music. Then how is this possible? Grandma, Ethan interrupted. You said his wife's name was Claire, right? Yes. Why? I always dream of a beautiful woman who plays the piano. She has long hair and smiles at me. In my dreams, she teaches me music. She's the one who showed me this melody. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now continuing, Richard felt a chill run down his spine. Claire had always said that when she passed, she'd find a way to keep spreading music in the world. He had never taken it seriously, but now... Ethan, Richard said, his voice trembling, can you describe this woman from your dreams? She's beautiful with really long brown hair, and she always wears a blue dress, and she has a small mark here on her face, Ethan said, pointing to his own left cheek. Richard pulled out his wallet and showed a photo of Claire. It was exactly as Ethan had described, including the small birthmark on her left cheek. That's her, the boy exclaimed. She's the woman from my dreams. She always tells me I have to take care of Grandma and that music will save me. Grace was crying uncontrollably. This revelation was more than she could process. Claire, my dear, she didn't forget me. Mrs. Grace, Richard said, kneeling before the elderly woman, I have a proposal for you. Claire always said that one day she'd create a music school for underprivileged children. She even left money in her will for it, but I never knew how to use it. Now I do. What are you saying? I want to start this school and I want you to be the director. Ethan would be the first student, but there would be spots for other kids in the community. Grace looked at Richard with suspicion. And what do you get out of this? The chance to fulfill my wife's last wish. And maybe find a reason to keep going. Grandma, can we accept? Ethan asked, his eyes shining. I don't know, my boy. Things that seem too good always come with a catch. Richard understood Grace's distrust. People like them were used to disappointment. Look, how about we start small? Ethan could come play in the lobby of my company a few times a week. It would be a real job with a salary. And in the meantime, I'll arrange proper medical care for you. How much salary? Grace asked, ever practical. $500 a week. Grace nearly dropped her cane. $500 a week just to play piano? It's more than fair for the talent he has. Grace looked at Ethan, who was beaming at the possibility. All right, but there are some conditions. Name them. First, if at any point I think this isn't good for the boy, I stop everything. Second, he keeps living with me. Third, I want everything properly documented, with a contract and receipts. Perfect, Richard agreed. When can we start? Tomorrow, if you want. That night, Ethan could barely sleep from excitement. He was going to have a real job at a big company, playing piano for important people. Grace, on the other hand, stayed awake all night, torn between hope and the fear that this was too good to be true. The next morning, Richard came to pick up Ethan from the projects where they lived. When he arrived at House 23, he was shocked by the conditions. It was truly just one room, with a single bed shared by grandmother and grandson, a 2-burner gas stove, and a small fridge that hummed constantly. "Ready, Grandma. I'm going," Ethan said, kissing Grace's forehead. "Behave yourself, you hear? And don't forget to thank Mr. Richard." On the way to the office, Richard tried to talk to Ethan to ease his nerves. "Are you excited?" "I am, sir, but also a little scared." "Scared of what?" "What if I don't play well? What if people don't like it? What if I ruin the piano?" "Ethan, you have a special gift. Trust me. And most of all, trust yourself." Richard's company was in downtown Atlanta, in a 20-story building. When they entered the lobby, Ethan was stunned. There was a shiny black grand piano in a separate area, surrounded by comfortable armchairs. "Is this piano for me to play?" "Yes, it is." It belonged to Claire. She always wanted it to be used to spread music. Ethan approached the instrument with reverence, as if he were in a sacred place. When he touched the first keys, the pure, crystal-clear sound echoed throughout the lobby. "Wow, it's so different from the piano in the square. Now you'll be able to play for real." Employees began arriving for work and soon gathered around the piano. Ethan was nervous at first, but little by little, he grew more comfortable. When he started playing the melody Claire had composed, a reverent silence filled the room. Jennifer, Richard's secretary, approached him with teary eyes. "Mr. Richard, this music, it's the same one Mrs. Claire used to play here in her last days before." "Yes, Jennifer, it was her last composition. How does this boy know it?" "It's a long story." During the lunch break, the lobby was packed. Employees, visitors, and even people from the street stopped to listen to Ethan play. The boy was radiant, feeling important for the first time in his life. "Can I record him playing?" Jennifer asked Richard. "You can, but ask him first." Jennifer approached Ethan. "Ethan, do you mind if I record you playing? It's to show my family." "Sure, ma'am." What Jennifer didn't mention was that she planned to post the video on the company's social media. She was so moved by the boy's performance that she wanted to share that special moment. When the video was posted that afternoon, the response was immediate. Within hours, hundreds of people had shared and commented. Ethan's story of playing in the company lobby began to spread across the city. At the end of his first workday, Richard took Ethan back home. The boy was exhausted, but happy. "Grandma, Grandma, I played a real piano today." Grace greeted her grandson with a smile. "And how was it, my dear?" "It was wonderful. People clapped and one lady even cried when I played." "And did Mr. Richard behave? Was he unkind to you?" "No, Grandma. He's very good to me." "And look," Ethan said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "He already gave me my pay for the first day." Grace took the envelope and counted the money. It was exactly what Richard had promised, equal to a day's work. "Everything checks out," she murmured, still suspicious. "Mrs. Grace," Richard said as promised, "I've also arranged a doctor's appointment for you. It's tomorrow morning at Mercy General Hospital. The doctor specializes in memory issues and will run all the necessary tests. I don't know if I can afford a private hospital visit. It's already paid for, it's part of our agreement." Grace looked at Richard with a mix of gratitude and suspicion. "Why are you doing all this for us?" "Because you've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope." That night, as Ethan slept, Grace stayed awake, thinking about everything that had happened. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream of a better future for her grandson. The next morning, while Grace went to her doctor's appointment, Ethan returned to work at the company. The lobby was even more crowded than the day before. The news about the prodigy boy had spread, and many people had come specifically to hear him play. "Ethan," Jennifer called, "there's a journalist here who wants to talk to you. Is that okay?" "I don't know. I need to ask Mr. Richard." Richard appeared and spoke with the journalist. "She's from the local paper. She wants to do a story about you." "What should I say?" "Just the truth. Tell your story, but don't give too many details about where you live, for safety. The interview was emotional. Ethan shared how he taught himself music, how he cared for his sick grandmother, and how music was his way of helping his family. The journalist was visibly moved by his story. "And what are your dreams, Ethan?" "I want to learn more music so I can help other kids like me, and I want Grandma to get better." When the article was published the next day, the response was even greater. The company's phone wouldn't stop ringing with people wanting to meet Ethan or offering help. But not all attention was positive. Some callers questioned whether this was child labor exploitation. Others suggested Grace was using her grandson to make easy money. Richard began to worry about the backlash. "Jennifer, I think we should limit Ethan's exposure. I don't want this to turn into a circus." "I agree, Mr. Richard. I'm already getting strange calls." That same day, Grace returned from her doctor's appointment with troubling news. "Ethan, my dear, I need to talk to you and Mr. Richard." "What happened, Grandma?" "The doctor said I have a serious problem in my head. It's not just tiredness like we thought." Richard sat beside Grace. "What exactly did the doctor say?" "He used some complicated words, but what I understood is that my memory will keep getting worse, and I might start confusing things, not recognizing people. Is there treatment?" "Yes, but it's expensive and takes time, and even with treatment, it won't stop the disease, just slow it down." Ethan began to cry. "Grandma, you won't forget me, will you?" "Of course not, my dear, I'll never forget you." But Grace was lying. The doctor had been clear. In time, she would lose the ability to recognize even her closest loved ones. "Mr. Richard," Grace said, "I need to ask you something very difficult." "Go ahead." "If one day I can no longer take care of Ethan, do you promise you won't let him go to an orphanage?" "Mrs. Grace, don't think about that now. Let's focus on treatment." "Promise me, sir, please." Richard looked at this brave woman who had raised Ethan alone and felt his heart tighten. "I promise." In the following days, a routine settled in. Ethan worked at the company 3 times a week, always accompanied by Richard. Grace underwent her medical treatment and, on good days, still managed to care for the house and prepare meals. The piano at the company became an attraction. Employees brought their families to meet Ethan, and the boy grew more confident. But something began to bother Richard. Ethan always seemed exhausted. "Ethan, are you sleeping well?" "Yes, Mr. Richard." "Are you sure? You have dark circles and look sleepy." "It's just, I still play in the square on other days. I can't stop, sir. People know me there and count on me." "But now you have a steady job. You don't need to play on the street anymore." "But what if one day you don't want me to work here anymore? Then I'll have nothing." Richard understood the boy's fear. Children who grow up in poverty learn early not to trust anything completely. "Ethan, you have my word. You'll always have a place here. But if you insist on playing in the square, then we'll increase your pay to make up for the exhaustion." "No need, sir. It's fine as it is. It's not about need, it's about fairness." That week, something unexpected happened. Grace was at the market buying medicine when she overheard 2 women talking. "Did you see the newspaper article about that boy who plays the piano?" "I did, poor little thing, right? But I'm suspicious of this whole story." "Why?" "Well, what a coincidence, huh? A rich businessman decides to help a poor boy out of nowhere. I bet there's something behind it." "You think it's a scam?" "I don't know, but be careful. These businessmen don't do anything for free." Grace returned home troubled by the conversation she'd heard. Was she being naive? Did Richard have ulterior motives? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Grace decided to test Richard. "Mr. Richard, can I ask you a direct question?" "Of course." "What do you really want with Ethan?" The question caught Richard off guard. "What do you mean?" "Everyone's saying rich businessmen don't do charity for nothing, that there's always something behind it." Richard sighed. He knew this suspicion would come up sooner or later. "Mrs. Grace, I'll be completely honest with you. When I saw Ethan playing Claire's song, it felt like she was sending me a sign, like it was her last gift to me." "And what does that mean?" "It means taking care of you helps me cope with missing my wife. It's selfish of me." if you want to see it that way. Grace fell silent for a moment. At least you're being honest, I respect that. And you still don't trust me. I'll always be wary of everyone when it comes to my grandson, but so far, you haven't given me a reason to stop trusting you. In the following days, life seemed to be settling into a routine for everyone. Ethan was getting used to his work schedule. Grace was responding well to her medical treatment, and Richard had found new motivation in his days. But on a Thursday in November, everything changed again. Ethan was playing in the company lobby when he collapsed onto the keyboard. Jennifer screamed, people gathered, and Richard rushed to help the boy. "Call an ambulance," Richard shouted, holding Ethan in his arms. At the hospital, the doctor was blunt. "The child is malnourished and dehydrated. How long has it been since he had a proper meal?" "But he has breakfast with me every day at the company," Richard said, confused. "That's not enough for a growing child. He needs at least 3 balanced meals a day." Grace, who had arrived at the hospital in despair, lowered her head. "It's my fault. The money you give for Ethan, I've been using to buy medicine, and what's left from the square barely covers rent and the electric bill." "Mrs. Grace, why didn't you tell me you were struggling?" "Because I didn't want to seem like I was taking advantage of your kindness." Richard felt guilty. How had he not noticed they were still in such hardship? "Starting today, that changes. I'll provide a food allowance and arrange lunch for Ethan at the company." "Mr. Richard." "It's non-negotiable, Mrs. Grace. It's my responsibility to make sure he's properly fed." While waiting for Ethan to wake up, Richard had a serious talk with Grace. "I've been thinking about something. Don't you think it would be better if you moved to a nicer place?" "With what money?" "I can help with rent for a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but somewhere more comfortable for you both." "And what if you get tired of helping later? Then we'd be in an even worse situation." "Then let's make a formal contract, an agreement that guarantees your safety." Grace thought for a long moment. "What's the catch?" "There is no catch. The only condition is that Ethan keeps playing at the company and that you accept proper medical treatment." "And if I die?" "Mrs. Grace, no, I'm serious. If I die, what happens to Ethan?" Richard felt a lump in his throat. That question touched on his deepest fears. "He would stay with me, if you allow it, of course." "You would adopt him?" "If necessary, yes." Grace began to cry. "I never thought Ethan could have a real family." "He already has a real family. You are his family. I would just be extra support." When Ethan finally woke up, he found Richard and Grace whispering beside his bed. "What happened?" "You fainted, my boy. But everything's fine now," said Grace, holding her grandson's hand. "Was it because I didn't eat lunch yesterday?" "Yes, Ethan, and that won't happen again," said Richard. "From now on, you'll have all your meals guaranteed." "You won't want me to work anymore." "I will. But first, you need to be healthy." In the days that followed, the changes in Ethan and Grace's lives were significant. Richard rented a 2-bedroom apartment in a simple but safe neighborhood near the company. He arranged for basic furniture and made sure they had everything they needed. Grace was torn between gratitude and the fear of emotional debt. "Ethan, do you understand? This could all end one day." "I do, Grandma. But Mr. Richard is good to us, and you always taught me we should accept kindness when it's genuine." "How can you be so sure it's genuine?" "Because he cries when he hears his wife's music, and someone who cries from longing is capable of real love." The boy's wisdom once again amazed Grace. The new apartment completely changed their routine. Ethan had his own room for the first time in his life, and Grace could cook in a real kitchen. The medical treatment was also working, and her episodes of confusion had lessened. But Richard still hadn't told them about his bigger plan, the music school he wanted to create. He was waiting for the right moment to reveal the project. One December afternoon, while Ethan was playing in the company lobby, Richard decided to share his plans. "Ethan, Mrs. Grace, I need to talk to you about something important." "What is it, Mr. Richard?" "Do you remember I mentioned creating a music school for underprivileged children?" "I do." "Well, I found the perfect place. It's an old house in the Riverdale neighborhood. There's space for several classrooms, a small auditorium, and even a garden where the kids can play. And you want Ethan to study there?" "I want him to be the first student, and I want you to be the educational coordinator." Grace nearly fell off her chair. "Me? But I barely know how to read properly." "You know music, and more importantly, you know how to teach underprivileged children. That kind of knowledge isn't learned in college. But I've never coordinated anything in my life. You'll have help. I'll hire qualified teachers, but I want you to be the heart of the project." Ethan was thrilled at the possibility. "Grandma, imagine how many kids will get to learn music." "It's a huge responsibility, my boy." "You don't have to decide now," said Richard. "Think it over, but know this would fulfill Claire's dream." That night, Grace couldn't sleep. The idea of running a music school was something she had never imagined for her life. Her, who had always been just a maid, being respected as an educator. "Ethan, do you think I can do it?" "Do what, Grandma?" "Run an entire school." "Grandma, you raised me all by yourself since I was a baby. If you could do that, you can do anything." The next morning, Grace woke up determined. "Mr. Richard, I accept being the school's coordinator." "Are you sure?" "I am, but on one condition." "What is it?" "I want the school to be named the Claire Wilson School of Music, so she'll always be remembered." Richard felt his eyes fill with tears. Claire would be honored. The next few months were intense. Richard bought the mansion and began renovations. Grace, despite her health limitations, involved herself in every detail of the project. Ethan kept playing at the company, but now with the hope of soon having other classmates to share his passion for music. The school's opening was scheduled for March, the start of the academic year. Richard insisted it be a simple event, focused on the local community. But a week before the opening, Grace had a relapse. She woke up one morning not recognizing where she was. "Who are you?" she asked Ethan, frightened. "Grandma, it's me, Ethan, your grandson." "I don't have a grandson. Where's my sister? She said she'd come get me to go home." Ethan panicked and called Richard. "Mr. Richard, Grandma doesn't recognize me." Richard arrived in 15 minutes and found Grace hiding in the bathroom, thinking Ethan was a stranger who had broken into her home. "Mrs. Grace, it's me, Richard, Claire's husband." "Claire, my little Claire, where is she?" "She couldn't come today, but she sent her love." The white lie calmed Grace, who allowed Richard to help her. At the hospital, the doctor was clear. "The disease is progressing faster than we expected. These episodes will become more frequent." What does that mean for her future? In a few months, she may not recognize anyone anymore, and she'll need constant medical care. Richard returned home with a heavy heart. How could he tell Ethan he would soon lose the only family he had? But it was Ethan himself who brought it up. "Mr. Richard, will Grandma get better?" "Ethan, your grandmother's illness has no cure. She'll only get worse with time." "Will she forget me?" Richard couldn't lie. "It's possible, yes." Ethan was silent for a long moment. "And after she forgets everything, what will happen to me?" "You'll stay with me, if you want, of course." "What if I don't?" "Then we'll find a family who will take good care of you. But I hope you'll want to stay." "Why?" "Because you taught me it's still possible to build a family, even after losing everything." In the following days, Grace had alternating episodes. Sometimes she recognized everyone and spoke normally about the school. Other times she didn't know where she was or who the people around her were. Ethan learned to handle these changes. On good days, he made sure to talk to his grandmother about the future. On bad days, he simply played piano for her because the music always calmed her. The opening of the Claire Wilson School of Music went ahead as planned. Grace was having a good day and managed to attend the ceremony. 40 children from the community signed up for free lessons. "Ethan," Grace said during the celebration, "even if I forget everything, I want you to remember one thing." "What, Grandma?" "You were the greatest joy of my life, and wherever I am, I'll always love you." "I love you too, Grandma." The school began operating the following week. Ethan was the most advanced student, but dedicated himself to helping the younger kids. Grace, on her good days, supervised activities with the wisdom of someone who had spent her whole life caring for children. Richard hired 3 qualified music teachers, but made sure Grace was included in important decisions. "Mrs. Grace, I think we should accept 15 more students. What do you think? I think we can, but we need to make sure we have enough teachers. I've already taken care of that. Then it's approved. Even with her illness, Grace felt fulfilled, seeing her youthful dream come true. She had always wanted to teach music to poor children, just as she had once been. But the bad days became more frequent. In June, Grace had to be hospitalized for a week because she got lost on the street and wandered for hours without knowing how to get home. "Mr. Anderson," the doctor said, "it's no longer safe for her to live alone, even with Ethan. She needs constant medical supervision. What do you recommend? A specialized care facility or 24-hour home care? And which is the better option for her?" "It depends on the family. The care facility offers better medical support, but a family environment might slow the progression of her illness." Richard chose the second option. He hired a nurse to stay with Grace during the day, and he moved into the apartment himself to care for her at night. Ethan grew worried about the changes. "Mr. Anderson, won't you get tired of taking care of us?" "Never, Ethan. You're my family now. Even when Grandma doesn't remember anything anymore, especially when she doesn't remember anything anymore." The routine with the nurse worked well for a few months. Grace's moments of clarity became rarer, but when they happened, they were precious. In September, during one of those lucid moments, Grace called Richard for a private conversation. "I need to ask you something while I still remember who you are." "Tell me, Mrs. Grace." "When I'm no longer really here, I mean when I forget everything, I want you to tell Ethan the truth about who he is." "What truth?" "He's not my biological grandson. He's the son of a girl I raised, but she died in childbirth. The father never came forward." Richard was shocked by the revelation. "Mrs. Grace, I was always afraid to tell him because I thought he'd love me less. But now that he has you, he needs to know the truth." "Are you sure?" "Yes. And there's one more thing. There are some papers in the drawer of my dresser. They're documents proving his biological mother was Claire's daughter." Richard felt as if the world had stopped. "What do you mean?" "Claire had a daughter when she was very young. She was forced to give her up for adoption. The girl grew up, came looking for me when she got pregnant, and then died in childbirth. I raised Ethan because he was Claire's grandson." "Mrs. Grace, that means that Ethan is your wife's great-grandson. He's your blood family." Richard had to sit down. Everything made sense now. The musical connection between Ethan and Claire wasn't just spiritual, it was genetic. "Why did you never tell me this?" "Because I was afraid you'd take him from me, and because I sort of forgot. The disease made me forget so much, but today I remembered." "Where are these documents?" "In the dresser drawer, inside a shoebox." That night, after Grace fell asleep, Richard went to look for the papers. He found birth certificates, a photo of Ethan's biological mother who looked strikingly like Claire, and a letter Claire had written to her daughter before giving her up for adoption. In the letter, Claire explained that her parents were forcing her to give up the child, but that one day she would come back for her. The letter was never delivered. Richard spent the whole night reading and rereading the documents. Ethan really was family. He was the great-grandson Claire never knew she had. The next morning, he decided to tell Ethan the truth. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about something very important." "Is it about Grandma?" "It's about you, about your family." "But my family is Grandma and now you." "Yeah, but there are more people in your family than you realize." Richard told me everything about Ethan's birth mother, the connection to Claire, the documents that proved the relation. Ethan listened quietly, processing the information. "So the woman in my dreams was my great-grandmother?" "Yes, she was." "And I'm really part of your family?" "Really." "And Grandma?" "Did she always know?" "Always. And she loved you like a biological grandson from day one." Ethan grew thoughtful for a moment. "Does this change anything?" "Change what?" "Is Grandma still my grandma?" "Of course she is. And you're still, well, I don't know what you are to me. I'm your honorary great-grandfather, and if you'll let me, I can also be your adoptive grandfather. What about the school? It's still your school. Our school. Then nothing important changes, Ethan concluded. The people I love are still the people I love. Richard was moved by the boy's maturity. In the following months, Grace's condition worsened significantly. She stopped recognizing Ethan entirely and began having episodes of agitation. She had to be hospitalized again. Mr. Anderson, the doctor said, she can no longer return home. She needs to stay here where we have the resources to care for her. Will she suffer? Not physically, but the mental confusion may distress her at times. And how long? We don't know. It could be months. It could be years. Every case is different. Ethan visited Grace every day at the hospital. Even when she didn't recognize him, he played music for her on a portable keyboard Richard had bought. The music still had the power to calm her, even when nothing else made sense in her mind. "Grandma," Ethan would say during his visits, "I know you don't recognize me, but I'm still your grandson, and I'll keep taking care of you forever." In December, a year after the school's opening, Richard organized an end-of-year recital. All the students would perform, and Ethan was the highlight of the evening. "I want to dedicate this performance to Grandma Grace," Ethan said during the recital. "She can't be here today, but she's the one who taught me that music is the language of the soul." Ethan played the piece Claire had composed, the same one that had led him to Richard. In the audience, there wasn't a dry eye. After the performance, an elderly woman approached Richard. "Excuse me for interrupting, but I recognize that song." "What do you mean?" "My sister used to play it when we were young. Her name was Claire Wilson." Richard was stunned. "Claire Wilson was my wife." "Then you must be Richard. Claire talked about you so much. I'm Margaret, her sister." "Margaret?" Claire always mentioned having a sister, but I lived in the countryside. We grew apart after our parents passed. I only found out she'd married years later. "And did you know I knew she was gone. That's why I came to Atlanta. I wanted to meet the man who made my sister happy." Richard introduced Margaret to Ethan. "Ethan, this is Margaret, Claire's sister, your great-great-aunt." "Wow, I have a great-great-aunt too?" "Yes, you do, sweetheart," Margaret said, emotional. "Margaret, and what a handsome boy you are. Just like Claire when she was little." Margaret's arrival added a new dimension to the family they were building. She was a 70-year-old widow, childless, who had lived alone on a small farm in the countryside. "Richard, can I make a suggestion?" "Of course. What if I moved here to the city? I could help take care of Grace and Ethan." "Margaret, that would be wonderful, but are you sure? Leaving your life in the countryside?" "What life? All I have there is loneliness. Here I have family." Margaret moved to Atlanta in January. She rented an apartment nearby and became a constant presence in Ethan and Richard's lives. The school was growing too. It now had 80 students and a waiting list. Richard needed to hire more teachers and extend the operating hours. "Ethan," Richard said one afternoon, "I'm thinking of starting a children's choir at the school. What do you think?" "That's great. Can I be part of it?" "Of course. In fact, I want you to be the lead soloist. And can Grandma listen when she's having a good day?" "Absolutely." The children's choir at the Claire Wilson School of Music was formed with 20 kids. Ethan, now 11, was truly the standout, but made sure to give his classmates room to shine too. The choir's first performance was at the very hospital where Grace was staying. Richard got permission to hold a small recital in the lobby. Grace was in a wheelchair, her gaze distant. But when the music started, something shifted in her expression. "Music," she whispered, the first word she'd spoken in weeks. Ethan walked over and sang just for her. "Dear Grandma, don't forget. No, your little grandson will always love you. Even if your memory fades, my heart will always remember." For a moment, Grace's eyes seemed to light up. She looked at Ethan and for a few seconds seemed to recognize him. My boy," she murmured, raising a trembling hand to touch Ethan's face. It was the last time Grace showed any sign of recognition. In the weeks that followed, she slipped into a completely vegetative state. "Can she still hear us?" Ethan asked the doctor. "We're not sure. But music seems to be the only thing that still gets any reaction from her. Ethan kept visiting Grace every day, always bringing his portable keyboard. He played the songs she loved, told her about school, about his new friends. In March, Grace developed pneumonia. The doctors were clear she wouldn't make it. "How long?" Richard asked. "A few days, a week at most." Ethan never left Grace's bedside. He played music for her day and night, holding her hand. "Grandma, I know you can't answer, but I want you to know I understand everything. I understand you loved me from the very first day, even though I wasn't your blood grandson. I understand you sacrificed your whole life to give me a better one. And I understand love isn't about blood. It's about choice. You chose me, and I choose you forever." In the early hours of a Friday, Grace passed away quietly. Ethan was holding her hand and playing Claire's song on the keyboard when she took her last breath. Richard found Ethan still playing, tears streaming down his face. "She's gone, isn't she?" "Yes, Ethan. She's gone." But she heard the music till the end. I felt her hand squeeze mine when I played her favorite part. Grace's funeral was simple, but moving. All the school's students were there, along with Richard's company employees and many members of the community who had known Grace over the years. Ethan played the piano during the ceremony. He chose Claire's song, which now held an even deeper meaning for him. "Today isn't a day for sadness," Ethan said at the funeral. "Today is a day for gratitude. Gratitude for having Grandma Grace in my life, for teaching me what real love is, and for showing me that family is chosen with the heart." After the funeral, Richard had a serious talk with Ethan. "Ethan, now it's just us. You, me, and Aunt Margaret. How do you feel about that?" "I feel at home." "Are you sure? Because if you want, I can look for a family who—" "Mr. Richard," Ethan interrupted, "you're my family. Aunt Margaret is my family. Grandma Grace will always be my family. Even if she's not here anymore, I don't want another family." "Then let's make it official. Do you want me to legally adopt you?" "Yes, but can I still be Ethan Grace Anderson?" "What do you mean?" "I want my name to be Ethan Grace Anderson, so I never forget her." "Of course you can." The adoption process was quick. Richard had resources and influence, and there were no legal obstacles. In June, Ethan officially became Ethan Grace Anderson. The school continued to grow. By the end of the second year, it had 120 students and had become a reference for music education for underprivileged children in Atlanta. Margaret became fully integrated into the family. She took care of the house, helped at the school, and became the grandmother Ethan had never had. "Aunt Margaret," Ethan asked one day, "do you think Grandma Grace and Claire met each other?" "I believe so, my dear, and I think they're very proud of you." "Why?" "Because you've managed to do what they always dreamed of, using music to spread love in the world." In December of the school's second year, Richard had a surprise for Ethan. "Ethan, I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "I want to create a scholarship for talented young musicians to attend conservatory. The first scholarship would be yours." "Conservatory?" "It's a more advanced music school. You could study composition, conducting, advanced music theory." "But would I have to leave our school?" "No. You'd attend the conservatory in the morning and help at our school in the afternoon." "What about the other boys?" "The other boys would have the same opportunity when their time came." Ethan grew thoughtful. "Can I think about it?" "Of course." That night, Ethan had a dream. He dreamed of Grace and Claire sitting in a garden, talking and laughing. They called him over and said, "Ethan, my son," Grace said in the dream, "music is a gift you've received to share with the world. Don't waste it. And remember," Claire added, "knowledge only has value when it's used to help others." Ethan woke up with the answer clear in his mind. "Mr. Richard, I accept the conservatory, but on one condition." "What is it?" "I want to create a program at our school to prepare other boys for the conservatory too." "Ethan, you're only 12. Don't you think you're aiming too high?" Grandma always said small dreams are an insult to God. Richard smiled. That boy had truly inherited Grace's wisdom. Ethan began his studies at the conservatory the following year. He was the youngest in his class, but also one of the most talented. His teachers were impressed not just by his technical skill, but by his musical maturity. Meanwhile, at the Claire Wilson School of Music, Ethan created the Grace Project, a program to identify and prepare talented young students from the community for scholarships at advanced music schools. The first beneficiary was Jacob, a 9-year-old boy who had joined the school the previous year. "Ethan," Jacob said, "do you really think I can get a scholarship like yours?" "Of course you can, Jacob. Talent isn't about money. It's about dedication." "What if I don't make it?" "Then you'll keep learning music at our school and be happy all the same. What matters isn't where you study, but the love you put into music." By 15, Ethan was recognized as one of the country's most promising young pianists. He had given concerts in several cities and received invitations to study abroad. But he always turned down any opportunity that would take him away from Atlanta permanently. "Why won't you accept, Ethan?" Richard asked. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Because my place is here, my mission is here." "What mission, sir?" "To continue the work Grandma Grace and Claire started, to use music to change lives. But you could do that from anywhere in the world." "I could, but I don't want to. I want to do it here where it all began." At 17, Ethan graduated from the conservatory with honors. Her final thesis was on music as a tool for social transformation, based on her experience at the Claire Wilson School of Music. At graduation, she gave an emotional speech. "When I was a child, I played on a broken piano in the square to help my grandmother. Today, I'm here because good people believed in me. But most of all, I'm here because I learned that music isn't an end in itself. Music is a means to connect people, to heal pain, to spread love. My grandmother Grace always said we don't get to choose where we come from, but we do choose where we're going. I choose to go back to where I started. I choose to keep playing for those who need to hear it. I choose to use my music to give other children the same opportunities I had. That's why today, I'm announcing the creation of the Grace and Claire Foundation, which will offer full scholarships to talented young people from underprivileged communities across Brazil." The auditorium erupted in applause. Richard was in the front row, crying with pride. After graduation, Ethan officially became the artistic director of the Claire Wilson School of Music. At 18, he was the youngest director of a music education institution in the country. Under his leadership, the school expanded, offering not just music lessons, but also tutoring, art workshops, and social assistance programs for students' families. "Ethan," said Margaret, now 75, "Grace would be so proud of the man you've become." "Aunt Margaret, everything I am, I learned from her, and from Dad Richard too." "Dad Richard." That's what I call him now. After all, he's my father in my heart. Richard, listening from the kitchen, felt his chest swell with emotion. Ethan had never called him Dad before. At 20, Ethan married Emily Rose, a young music teacher he'd met at the conservatory. The ceremony was simple, held in the school garden with all the students present. "Emily," Ethan said during the vows, "do you accept not just marrying me, but marrying my mission? Because I come as a package deal, a whole school of kids and a life dedicated to music." "I accept it all," Emily replied, laughing and crying at the same time, "including the noisy kids who'll always be in our house." "And do you accept that our honeymoon will be a tour of public schools in rural areas to find new talent?" "I accept that too. Actually, it was my idea." The honeymoon really was a music tour. Ethan and Emily visited 20 small towns in Georgia, giving free performances and searching for musically gifted children. They found 15 young talents who received full scholarships to study at the Claire Wilson School of Music. 2 years later, Grace Lily was born, Ethan and Emily's first child. The baby was baptized in the same church where Grace had been baptized 70 years earlier. "Dad Richard," Ethan said on the day of the baptism, "Grace Lily will grow up hearing stories about her great-grandmother Grace, and she'll learn that family isn't just blood, it's love. Will she know the whole story? All of it. including the part where a busy businessman stopped in a square because he heard a song that changed his life. And what if she doesn't like music? Then she'll be whatever she wants to be, but she'll definitely grow up knowing she has the power to change the world, whether through music or anything else. By 25, Ethan had founded 5 music schools in different cities across Georgia. The Grace and Claire Foundation had provided scholarships to over 200 young people. At one of the schools he founded, he met an elderly woman who cleaned the building every morning. "Mrs. Martha," Ethan asked, "do you like music?" "Oh, my dear, I love it, but I never had the chance to learn." "How about if I give you piano lessons? At my age?" "Are you joking with me? It's never too late to learn something that's good for the soul." Mrs. Martha became the oldest student at the school at 72. Her lessons always drew an audience of children who loved watching the elderly woman's determination. "See," Ethan would say to the kids, "Mrs. Martha proves music has no age limit, and you, being so young, have no excuse not to put in the effort." One day during a lesson, Mrs. Martha shared her story. "You know, Professor Ethan, I always wanted to learn piano. When I was a girl, I'd walk past a house where a lady gave lessons. I'd listen by the window because I couldn't afford to pay. And what happened? Life happened. I married young, had children, had to work. The dream got left behind. But now you're living that dream." "I am. And you know what's most beautiful? My grandchildren come to watch me play. They're proud of their grandma." This conversation gave Ethan a new idea. He created a program at the school called Never Too Late, exclusively for adults and seniors who wanted to learn music. The program was a success. In 6 months, there were 40 students between 40 and 80 years old. "Ethan," said Richard, now 60, "you never run out of ideas. I learned from Grandma Grace that as long as we're alive, we should keep growing." And what's the next idea? An annual music festival, bringing together all the schools we've created, every student who's passed through here, all the teachers. A grand celebration of music as a tool for change. And what would this festival look like? 3 days of free performances at Liberty Square, the same place where it all began. "Ethan, this is huge. Do you realize how much work this will take?" "I do. But I also have a network of people who believe in the project, and I know Grandma Grace and Claire will be there in some way, approving it all." The first Grace and Claire Music Festival happened when Ethan was 27. 3 days of non-stop music with performances from students of all ages, 5-year-olds to 80-year-olds. The highlight was when Ethan played alone the piece Claire had composed. It was the first time he'd played it in public since he was a child. In the audience, thousands listened in reverent silence. Many cried, even without knowing the story behind the melody. When he finished, Ethan stepped up to the microphone. This piece was composed by Claire Wilson for her music teacher, Grace Williams. Years later, this same music brought their lives together through me. Today, it brings all our lives together through music. My grandmother Grace always said music is the language of the soul. She was right. Music knows no boundaries, not age, social class, race, or religion. Music connects hearts. That's why I dedicate this festival to everyone who, like Grandma Grace, believes we can change the world, one child at a time. To everyone who, like Claire, uses their talents to spread beauty in the world. And most of all, I dedicate it to every child here today who will carry this mission forward. Because music never dies. It only transforms and multiplies. The festival became an annual event, growing bigger each year. By the 5th festival, it was live-streamed and watched by people worldwide. Ethan, now 32, had become a national figure in inclusive music education. He received invitations to speak at universities, consult on public policies, and work abroad. But he still lived in Atlanta, in the same neighborhood where he'd grown up with Grace. "Emily," he said to his wife one night, "do you ever regret marrying a man who'll never want to leave here?" "Never. Because this is where you make a difference. And making a difference is what makes you happy. What if the girls want to live somewhere else when they grow up? Then they will, but they'll carry the values they learned here within them." Grace Lily, now 10 years old, and Claire Grace, 7, were constant presences at the school. They helped with classes for younger children and already showed musical talent. "Daddy," Grace Lily asked one day, "do I have to like music just because you do?" "Of course not, sweetheart. You can be whatever you want to be. So can I be a veterinarian?" "You can." "And can I keep playing the piano as a hobby?" "Absolutely." "Great, because I like music, but I love animals." Ethan smiled. His daughters were growing up with the freedom to choose their own paths, something he had always wished for all children. At 35, Ethan decided to write a book telling his story. Soul Music: How a Broken Piano Changed My Life became a bestseller and was translated into multiple languages. The book's earnings were entirely dedicated to expanding the music schools. "Ethan," said Margaret, now 85, "do you think you exaggerated in some parts of the book?" "Which parts, Auntie?" "Those stories about dreaming of Claire and Grace." "I didn't exaggerate at all. It happened exactly as I wrote it." "Do you really believe they appeared in your dreams?" "Aunt Margaret, I've learned that some things in life don't need to be explained. They just need to be felt." "And do you feel they're still around?" "Every day. Every time a child plays the piano for the first time. Every time an adult fulfills an old dream. Every time music transforms a life." Ethan's book inspired the creation of similar programs in other countries. Educators from around the world visited the Claire Wilson School of Music to understand the method that had turned music into a tool for social inclusion. "What's the secret?" asked an American teacher during a visit. "There's no secret," Ethan replied. "There's love. When you teach with love, the student learns with love. And when they learn with love, they change the world with love. But there must be some specific technique. The technique is to treat every child as if they're capable of changing the world, because they are." At 40, Ethan was invited to become the national director of a government music education program. It would be a prestigious position with a high salary and national recognition. "What do you think?" he asked Richard, now 75. "I think you should follow your heart. My heart says to stay here and then stay, but it's a chance to impact the whole country." "Ethan, you're already impacting the whole country. Your schools, your students, your example. Sometimes impact doesn't come from the position you hold, but from the life you live." Ethan declined the offer and continued dedicating himself to his schools. At 45, the network had 15 schools and had benefited over 5,000 children and teens. Many former students had become professional musicians, teachers, or music therapists. Others had pursued completely different careers, but carried with them their love for music and the values learned at the schools. "You know what makes me proudest?" Ethan said to Emily one evening. "What?" "It's not the students who became famous musicians. It's the ones who became better people because of music." "How so?" "That girl who was so shy and is now a lawyer, but uses music to communicate better with clients. That boy who had behavioral issues and is now a devoted father because he learned discipline through music. Those are the transformations that matter." At the 20th annual festival, Ethan, now 47 years old, made a special announcement. "Today, I'm here to announce that starting next year, I'll be passing the executive leadership of the schools to my daughter Grace Lily." The audience was surprised. Grace Lily was only 22 and had just graduated with a degree in music education. "I know some may think it's too soon," Ethan continued, "but she grew up in this project. She knows every detail, every student, every dream, and most of all, she has the same passion I do. I won't step away completely. I'll stay on as the academic director and focus more on new expansion projects. But it's time for a new generation to take the lead. My daughter Grace has innovative ideas. She wants to create online music programs to reach children across all of Brazil. She wants to use technology in ways I can't even imagine. And she has my full trust." Grace Lily stepped onto the stage, emotional. "Dad, thank you for your trust. I promise to honor the legacy of great-grandmother Grace, great-grandmother Claire, and yours. And I promise to innovate without losing the essence, to expand without losing the warmth, to grow without losing humility. Because I've learned from you that what matters most isn't the size of the project, but the depth of love we put into it." The transition was smooth. Grace Lilly brought important innovations. She created online classes for children in towns without physical schools, developed music teaching apps, and partnered with public schools to integrate music into formal education. Ethan, freed from administrative duties, devoted himself to what he loved most, teaching and composing music. At 50, he released his first album as a composer. Every song was dedicated to important moments in his life. One for Grace, one for Claire, one for Richard, one for his daughters. The biggest hit was Piano in the Square, which told his story in music, from the boy playing on the street to the man who transformed lives through music. "Dad," said Claire Grace, now 25 and a graduate in music therapy, "this song makes me cry every time I hear it." "Why, sweetheart?" "Because it makes me imagine the brave boy you were, and it makes me proud of the family we have." You know you can be proud, not just of the family, but of yourself, right? You're revolutionizing music therapy in this country. I learned from you that revolutionizing isn't about being better than others, it's about being useful to others. Claire Grace had specialized in using music to treat children with disabilities and developmental disorders. Her work was internationally recognized. At 55, Ethan received the invitation that moved him the most, to give a lecture at the university where Claire had studied composition 40 years earlier. The auditorium was packed with music students, professors, and curious listeners. Ethan told his full story, from the broken piano in the square to the schools now spread across the country. "In the end," he said to close the lecture, "none of this would have happened if a busy businessman hadn't stopped to listen to a boy playing on the street. Sometimes we think changing the world requires grand actions, but the truth is, the world changes when we stop to listen, when we stop to care, when we stop to love. My grandmother Grace taught me that family is chosen with the heart. My father Richard taught me that true wealth is being able to help others. My wife Emily taught me that love is supporting each other's dreams. My daughters taught me that the future will always be better than the present when we educate with love. But the most important lesson I learned from music, it only exists when someone plays and someone listens. Alone, it doesn't exist. It needs connection. It needs community. It needs love. So my advice to you is simple. Play your music. It doesn't matter if it's on the piano, the guitar, with your voice, or in life. Just play, because there will always be someone who needs to hear exactly the music you have to offer. The lecture was recorded and went viral online. Millions of people watched and were inspired by Ethan's story. At 60 years old, Ethan decided to write a second book, Letters to Grace, Lessons from a Grandmother I Never Forgot. The book was a collection of imaginary letters to his grandmother, sharing his life, his achievements, his fears, and his joys. The most touching letter was the last one. Dear Grandma Grace, today I turned 60. The same age you were when you raised me alone, working day and night to give me the best you could. I want you to know that I made it. I became the man you wanted me to be. I used my music to help others. I built a family based on love, not just blood. But most of all, I came to understand that you never really left. You're here every time I hug a child learning the piano. You're here every time I see an adult fulfilling an old dream. You're here every time music transforms a life. You taught me that love is a verb, not a noun. That family is a choice, not just fate. That music is a bridge, not just sound. Today, at 60, I have 35 schools across the country. We have over 15,000 students. We've trained hundreds of music teachers. We've touched thousands of families. But do you know what makes me proudest? That every school has your photo at the entrance. And beneath it, it says, Grace Williams, the woman who taught us that love has no limits. The children ask who the woman in the photo is, and I tell them your story. I tell them how you took in a baby who wasn't your own and loved him as if he were. I tell them how you worked tirelessly to give me opportunities. I tell them how you never gave up, even when everything seemed impossible. And you know what happens? The children get inspired because they realize that if you achieved so much with so little, they can too. Grandma, thank you for choosing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for teaching me that the most beautiful music in the world is the music of love. Your grandson forever, Ethan. The book became an even bigger success than the first. The sales were used to create a permanent fund to ensure the schools would be maintained forever. Richard, now 85, read the book every night before bed. "Ethan," he said during a visit, "Grace would be so proud to see all this." "She is seeing it, Dad. I'm sure of it." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I still dream of her sometimes, and in the dreams she's always smiling." "What does she say?" "She says love is never lost. It just transforms and multiplies." At 65, Ethan was diagnosed with a degenerative disease that would gradually affect his motor skills. In a few years, he wouldn't be able to play the piano anymore. The news shook the whole family and the school community. "Dad," said Grace Lily, "we'll find the best doctors in the world. We'll find a treatment." "Sweetheart, I've already looked. There's no cure. But it's okay." "How can it be okay?" "Because I've already played everything I needed to play. I've already taught everything I needed to teach. I've already loved everything I needed to love." "But you're still so young." "Grace, 40 years ago, I thought I'd spend the rest of my life playing a broken piano in the square. God gave me far more than I deserved." Ethan decided to give his last public concert on Claire's piano, the same piano he had first played at Richard's company. The concert was held at the 25th Grace and Claire Music Festival. 20,000 people gathered in Liberty Square to hear him play for the last time. The program included all the important songs of his life, the composition by Claire that had changed everything, his own compositions, and a new song he had written especially for the occasion. When it was time for the new song, Ethan addressed the audience. "This last song I wrote for all the people who changed my life. For Grandma Grace, who taught me that love has no limits. For Claire, who taught me that music is the language of the soul. For my dad, Richard, who taught me that kindness is the greatest wealth. For my wife, Emily, who taught me that true partnership is supporting each other's dreams. For my daughters, who taught me that the future will always be brighter when we educate with love. But most of all, I wrote it for all the children here today who will carry on this mission. Because music never stops. It just passes from one generation to the next. This song is called Thank You Life, because that's what I feel. Gratitude for a life that has been far more beautiful than I ever imagined." When Ethan began to play, a reverent silence fell over the square. It was a simple melody, but deeply moving. It spoke of gratitude, love, and hope. At the end, the audience stood and applauded for 10 minutes. Many openly wept. Ethan rose from the piano, bowed, and said, "Thank you for the music, life. Thank you for everything." In the months that followed, Ethan's hands gradually lost their coordination. He devoted himself more to composition and teaching theory. "Dad," said Claire Grace, "aren't you sad that you can't play anymore?" "Sweetheart, I play in other ways now. I play through you. I play through my students. I play through every life that music has touched. But it must be different. It is different, but not worse. It's like I planted seeds for 40 years, and now it's time to watch the forest grow." At 70, Ethan published his final book, The Music Forest: How to Plant Dreams and Harvest Transformations. The book was a practical guide for educators who wanted to use music as a tool for social change. It included methodologies, success stories, and reflections on the role of art in education. "This isn't a book about music," Ethan wrote in the introduction. "It's a book about love. Because music without love is just noise, and love without music is just silence. When we bring them together, we create the most beautiful melody in the world, the melody of transformation." At 75, Ethan decided to take one last trip. He wanted to visit all the schools he had founded, speak with every principal, and see the new projects. The trip lasted 3 months. At each school, he was welcomed as a hero, but he made sure to clarify, "I'm no hero. I'm just a boy who was lucky enough to meet good people along the way. The real heroes are the teachers here every day changing lives. The real heroes are the students who believe they can be better through music." At the last school he visited, he encountered a scene that moved him deeply. An 8-year-old orphan girl was playing piano on an old, out-of-tune instrument. Beside her, an elderly woman held a donation box. "What's your name?" Ethan asked the girl. Martha Grace. And who is the lady with you? She's my heart grandma. She found me on the street and raised me. And where did you learn to play piano? On my own. I watched the lessons through the window and then practice here. Ethan felt a shiver. It was as if history was repeating itself. Martha Grace, would you like to study at a real music school? I'd love to, sir, but we don't have money. What if I told you I know a school where you can study for free? You really know one? I do. Actually, I helped create this school. Ethan spoke with the local principal and arranged a full scholarship for Martha Grace. He also secured medical care for the girl's adoptive grandmother. Why are you doing this for us, the woman asked. Because many years ago, someone did the same for me, and I learned that the only way to repay love is by passing it forward. Back in Atlanta, Ethan shared the story with his family. It's amazing how life repeats itself, said Emily. It doesn't repeat, Ethan corrected. It expands. Every child we help will help other children. Every life we change will change other lives. And so the music continues, forever. At 80 years old, Ethan was in a wheelchair, but his mind remained sharp and active. He received daily visits from former students, teachers, and admirers. One day, Martha Grace came to see him, now a 15-year-old girl and an exceptional pianist. Professor Ethan, I came here to play for you. What will you play? The song that changed your life, Claire's music. Martha Grace played the melody with remarkable sensitivity. When she finished, Ethan was in tears. That was beautiful, Martha, thank you. Professor, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think one day I'll be able to help other children the way you helped me? I'm certain of it. In fact, you're already helping. Every time you play, you're spreading beauty into the world. And beauty always transforms lives. How can you be so sure? Because that's what I've learned in 80 years of life. When you plant love, you always harvest transformation. The end of the story. Now that we've reached the end of this touching journey, we'd love to know, what did you think of Ethan's story? Which moment moved you the most? Leave your honest comment and tell us where you're following us from. If this story stirred any reflections on family, music, or overcoming challenges, share them with us. Your opinion matters. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.